Welcome to Real Life Fiction Live. This is a live Facebook Live AMA event, Ask Me Anything event, hosted by me, Matt James, and my first guest in this series of Facebook Lives is Andrew Clawson. So yes, this is a pre-recorded live interview that we did on Facebook, and this is just the audio only version of it that I am just supplementing into the Real Life Fiction feed. So enjoy and look for these on Facebook as well. And we will have some other authors scheduled and just have some nice little conversations that are audience driven. So you guys are asking the questions and Andrew and I are just kind of feeding off each other in this particular episode. And just for clarity, the first about 15 minutes, we are trying to figure out the Facebook Live formula. And because I was going through a third-party software, it wasn't showing the feed to the audience for the first few minutes until I figured something out. So it'll just be Andrew and I talking to each other while we're trying to figure out exactly what we're doing, because this is the first Facebook Live event. So just letting you all know, it's about the first 15 minutes, and then we start at getting the questions in that were being asked. So have fun, enjoy. Okay, yeah, we have. All right, I think we're rolling.
We're in business. Nice.
We're in business. Hey, there she is. My problem is I don't know if it's going to come up in StreamYard. So if it doesn't, all I know is, hey, Allison, how you doing? Allison Valentine is in the chat.
Hey, Allison.
So yeah, Allison is wonderful. She is involved with a lot of authors in a lot of different ways, managing a lot of Facebook groups for a few of them too, which is really cool.
Nice.
She's very active with Ernest MC, very active in a couple of my groups actually, but she's great. So how you doing, Allison?
We're all working through this together.
We are all working through this together. We are trying to make this thing work. The good news is I am hopefully going to be able to download this as audio, so I will put it into the feed in my in the Real Life Fiction podcast. So, hey, James, what's going on? And there's this lady named Kristen that stalks me. It's very, very odd. And if nobody knows who that is my lovely wife. She's watching from the other room, and I told her it's not that formal of an event. She doesn't have to lock herself in the room with the dog. But yeah, and James has been one of my longest long-term readers I've had since day one. So
nice.
James,
awesome.
James, do you remember how we first connected? If you can hear me, James, do you remember how we first connected? What was the reason? I'm sure you remember, but I also thought it was pretty hilarious. And this would have been back in beginning of 2016, I think, summer of 2016. So I'm curious if he, and I don't know what kind of delay there is. So I don't think there's a huge delay. So, but we are getting some questions. They are not coming through on StreamYard, so that may have just been a failure on this part. Yeah, no. So yeah, they're. I don't know if I can throw them up. Okay, yeah. So it just popped up there. So yeah, it's not a long delay, but yeah, there's not sure if James had been able to hear me, Mr. Buchanan, but so years ago, my parents had talked about buying a bowling alley in northern Georgia. We were in the bowling business for about 60 years, and my family, from my grandfather through to my dad, and then there was a bowling alley up in a little town in northern Georgia called Blairsville, and there was a bowling alley there for years. So. He said, LOL, sorta. I know I read your first book and it took place. Yeah, so there's a bowling alley up there, and I'm like, so I wanted to mention it, just wanted to pay, just one of those weird little quirky things from my childhood. And I more or less destroyed Blairsville, Georgia in that book. and that's where James is from. So he just happened to message me and say, "Oh man, Blairsville! It's the first time I've ever heard it mentioned in a book before." But yeah, that was, and then him and I kind of connected from that, and he's been, like I said, he's been reading my stuff since my very first book.
Nice. That's awesome.
So yeah.
Do you
But
that the burning question I have is, do you still bowl? Or
no,
did you
no.
ever?
Oh yeah, no, I was actually pretty good for a while. I bowled a ton of tournaments. I traveled a lot around like southern half of Florida. And James said he still lives there. So yeah. But yeah, it was kind of one of those things where body started to break down. I'd been in the business so long, as far as I just mentally started getting burned out, and just kind of got over it. Was kind of done, kind of tired, and that was kind of about it. Didn't yeah.
Yeah, you figure once you get to that level, I mean, just like with anything, the degrees of separation between people who are super successful and those who are right on the fringe, it's not much. So most of it's in your head at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And it was body, because I had suffered a couple of injuries between my hand and between my back, and wasn't as good as I had been because of physical ailments. The mind was still sharp. I still understood. Like, it wasn't like I was. It was just a lot of frustration too, because I still felt like I was as good as I ever was, but I just wasn't performing up to what I guess my standards were. So that's kind of part of it as well. Oh well, it is what it is. Still trying to figure out how to get comments to show up. I know how to do it. They're just not. It's just not happening, and it's really annoying. So, got nothing to do with us. We're actually live, and there's people watching. But we can create some poll questions if we want to. But I really wanted to get to just be able to see the questions pop up, and the only way to do that, I think, yeah, bowling career to a sitting career. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, basically, and not hurting myself as often now, but so that's a plus.
You build up a lot of muscle to pick up small children and animals, so I think you're beneficial in the long run.
Yeah. Allison has a comment and question. Andrew, you write fantastic adventure thriller novels, and you always put the reader into the book. How do you manage to do that?
Thank you, first of all, Allison. I appreciate that. I try very hard, and I never know if I succeed. So it's reassuring to hear that.
Yep. Same.
And I'm sure, not to get away with Matt, I know you probably deal with the same, everybody deals with the same anxieties, the same questions. And, I'm grateful for something like that. And I'm sure Matt is too all the time. So to answer your question, I always try to, when I approach writing, one of the things I do is, from a technical perspective, I look at a scene as a camera. And the character who is the main character, I imagine that they have a camera in front of their face. And whenever I'm in their head, the camera is behind their eyes, and you want to experience what they're experiencing. So you can do that pretty well visually just by thinking through what's happening in a scene. But when you really get into the emotional aspect of it, I think that helps, because we all, as people, have different common emotions that we share. And if you can get someone to experience something like, so let's say, for example, I'm writing about somebody who's going to a bowling alley, just to steal something we've been talking about for a while. If you talk about the smell of stale beer or hot dogs or popcorn or the bumper lanes in there, I would probably put the bumper lanes in my scenes, because I know we've all been in a bowling alley and we've all used those bumper lanes or seen them. And that's something that we can all anchor onto. And hey, now I can see the comments come up.
Yeah, there we go. You were talking and I read something. So for whatever reason, it has to be set to public and not friends, which I don't know why that matters, but I guess that might just be a StreamYard issue. So here.
Yeah. Oh,
there's your question. Look at that. Look how fun that is.
Yeah, Allison, it's just about finding the kind of the shared ground that we all have as people. And I think that if the description starts in my mind and it ends in yours, I stole that from Stephen King. I think that can lead to a better read overall. So I would actually come back and say, as a personal fan of Matt's books, do you find that those type of situations happen in Matt's books often as well? Because I know that I do when I've read them. I preach about Jack adventures, to all my readers. So I was just wondering, is that something that you're seeing across our books, or is that something that you look for more to an extent of? Sounds like you get a lot of reading under your belt, so I'm pretty sure that you get a lot of chance to do this.
Yeah, if I have, if Allison is definitely somebody that I would pose that question to, because I know she does a lot of reading. I know I definitely have, as far as a consumer, I definitely see that in some of my favorite authors. So it's probably where I go out of my way to make sure I can get that type of content in. So try to make the characters as relatable as possible, as normal as possible, even if they're like Jack, who has a really distinguished military career under his belt, who also has a very deep knowledge on parts of history, not all of it. But I think that's what the appeal for him is, at least in my eyes, is that he doesn't know everything, and he relies on other characters in the book to accomplish these missions. So he's not just some solo guy that can do everything. He has his limits, and that's appealing for me, anyways, as a consumer and a reader, or as a writer. Um, but yeah.
So I actually will go back to one of your opening scenes that it still sticks with me. And I don't want to spoil it. I'm sure everybody's probably read this, but stop me from spoil it. It takes place at a place that has an emotional connection for so many people. It's tied to World War II, tied to the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. And I remember, I still remember this. I've read thousands of books in my life, but I still remember this from your book. Putting someone in a place that has, the scene can serve so well as driving that engagement of it elicits these feelings that we all share. The disgust, the horror, the sadness, and then using that as a springboard for the action that comes that we're all really there for, because we like thrillers, action adventure books. I think that's a real skill that you either focus on or you have, and I certainly didn't have it. I really have to work at it. I don't know, maybe it's natural for you, but I think that using your environment very well to connect to the reader is a trick to make that happen.
It is. I also like to pull in stuff that's pretty obvious from like my personal life, whether it's an influence. Like I love mentioning movies, pop culture references, my favorite fictional characters, which happen to be like Indiana Jones, and like all of my stuff that I like. I try to have my characters like favorite bands, like that type of stuff. And because why else would that reference be in that book for that specific character if it's like way out of left field, like doesn't really, I guess, do anything for the story itself, but it just adds another layer, another little thing for that character. And I try not to just throw stuff in there just for character building purposes. I try to have it from me. Like Jack's favorite modern band is Volbeat. They're one of my favorite modern bands, and his favorite classic rocker is Bob Seger, and he's one of my favorites. So it's going into depth of that kind of stuff. It's not just, I see a name, I throw it in there because I know it'll stick. If that's the case, I'm not using the obscure references that I like to use. I will use more relevant references if I'm really trying to get a rise out of just the populace, but that's not really the point, at least for me, it's not. And I know I've had people where they're like, the character just has so much density to him, and he has so much, just so much for me to kind of like feed off of, and it's mostly because I'll just include some of the useless kind of dumb things that would be in a normal person's background, I guess. It has nothing to do with the book, but it's still like, hey, you're character building here, so let's throw it in there and just have it as some fodder. And I like doing it. I mean, I know it worked. Yeah.
Yeah, and it teaches an individual brushstroke, and you don't need a whole lot of them to make a really complete character.
Sure.
because you hit those touchstones, and then you let people run with it, and they make their connections to it, and it means something to everybody else.
Yeah. James also said the way for me to know if it's a good book is that I read it and it plays like a movie in my head, and that is one thing that James and I have in common. So I write like it's a movie playing in my head. So I know Andrew does a lot of the same stuff where he sees it from like a director's chair. Like if it's on TV, if it's a movie, it's sometimes hard to convey because you're like lighting, camera angles, this, that. There's so much little detail that you can't really put into words, I guess. But Allison, a question for you both. Throw it up on the screen. A question for you both. How do you keep your characters feel real without them getting old? So I'm assuming you're talking about without them getting stale, not necessarily like actual age old. Oh man, let me think. What about? Do you have a quicker answer than I'm trying to come up with? I have an idea, but I don't want to stumble through the answer.
Oh yeah, no, it's I try to remember that, and that's a great question because I try to remember that books are meant to entertain. They are here to, for me at least, and I'm sure Allison's probably the same for you. It's a chance for me to escape from reality and enjoy a new world. If people who read books travel around the world every day, and I think it's important to remember that. So you put your characters in situations. They don't necessarily have to be exotic locations or at the bottom of an underwater cave and they're about to drown, exciting, terrible places, but put them in places that allow them to experience the entire world. And you get to go along for the ride of them growing throughout that experience. And I think we grow, each of us do, every day in our new experiences. It's a matter of keeping things fresh by keeping people on their toes and keeping things moving. Stagnation occurs when you fall into a rut and you're just doing the same thing over and over again. So give your characters an opportunity to explore themselves by putting them in situations that challenge them. Would be my rambling long answer. So great question. I'm sorry I couldn't answer more succinctly.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll add on to that. I mean, like I always say, how much trouble can one guy get himself into? And the answer is as much as humanly possible, because that's kind of what we do, right? I mean, that's how much bad luck can one guy run into? And the idea is to have the character, whether it's Harry, whether it's Jack, whether it's whoever, just get into some awful situations and then find some clever ways to get out of them. And it just so happens it's Harry or Jack. It's not necessarily character A, character B, character C. It's just the current character in the book. Like I never feel like, oh, it's Jack getting into another situation like this. This is boring. This is whatever. It's me creatively coming up with a scene that I think is cool, and Jack just happens to be a part of it. So I never really look super deep into that, which I think is probably a good thing. I just don't overanalyze it, I guess. It's just fun. It's Jack, but I also like breaking the fourth wall a lot with stuff with Jack willingly like voicing his opinion on why does this crap keep happening to me? Like why, like what kind of luck do I have? Like I like doing that because it kind of if you are Jack, you're thinking the exact same thing, right? So like what is it from Die Hard, right? Die Hard 3. I think Holly, she's like, why does this keep happening to us? And it's just like I just always think that kind of like admission is funny, and it's just it's quirky, but I'm also a really big fan of just breaking the rules when it comes to writing stories. Like I don't do anything properly, and
what is it they say? Bad decisions make good stories.
Yeah, basically, and you'll find this interesting. Allison may have been around for this for a live that I did with Ernest Dempsey. He was asking me about writing, and I said I've had some comments in the past where negative, a lot of them negative, not a lot of them, but a few of them negative, about my style. And like, I don't really write traditionally third person past typical narrative. I like using a lot of inner monologue, but I like using the POV of the character. But that's like, uh, so if I'm writing a scene and it's Jack's POV, the only thing that the reader will technically know is what Jack knows. And that's more of a first person thing versus a third person thing. But at the same time, this is just me creative. I can't justify telling the reader something if it's Jack's point of view, because if Jack doesn't know it and he's the leader of the point of view, how can I convey that to the reader without it feeling kind of cheap? Is a way, that's just how I've always felt with writing. That's why I prefer to write in first person. For me, it's more direct, it's more straightforward, it makes more sense. Honestly, it just makes more sense. Uh, so I do that with a lot of my characters, where it's like Jack doesn't have all the answers, and if he doesn't have all the answers, I don't think I can just convey it to the reader either, because this is Jack's story, or it's his point of view. That's why working in the point of view of other characters is so important. And it's a big thing for any novice writers out there. Work in some other point of views to help build some of the story that you don't have a real concrete way of doing for your readers in any other way. Because, like I said, it's the way I've always done it. I kind of mix different styles of writing into one just to make the story, I guess, seem more realistic. Uh, you know, so that's my.
So that makes me think of a question. Thinking back to, if you have a couple like favorite books that you've read, and I'll to not put you on the spot, I'll jump in and say this. So one of my favorite books of all time is The Alienist by Caleb Card.
Okay.
And it's set in, late 1800s New York, and it's this guy is a doctor who is what would be eventually become a forensic psychologist, but the discipline doesn't exist yet. So it's set in first person, but it jumps through different points of view at different chapters. Now, to me, it's one of my favorite books, and it's super interesting because you get the perspectives, but they're limited of each person in each chapter.
Mm-hmm.
I would find it horribly challenging to write like that because I don't think I'm good enough to do that. But seeing it done gives you an idea of, really what works, and then you just need to figure out your own limitations. So I would ask you, if you have a favorite book or two, is it written all first person, like
No,
George
no.
R. R. Martin, or?
So this is what's really weird is the first, probably the first 3 or 4 books or around was my Hank Boyd Adventures series, and that was the first few books I ever wrote was in that series, and I got the idea from a guy I've talked about a lot on this podcast is Jeremy Robinson, and his Antarctos Rising book was still one of my favorite books he's ever written, but he has an expanded series called the Antarctos Saga, which is a bunch of long novella style books within the series being told from a different perspective. And there's a quirky way of writing that I liked of his was the main character in the book is all first person present, but the rest of the book is third person past. And that's how I started writing. So the very first few books I wrote were all written in 2 different perspectives. And mostly because Hank was supposed to be what like Jack is right now, is he's like an extension of me as far as his personality and just what I would do in certain situations, just being an average person. So writing the Hank character felt weird outside of first person present because it's supposed to be like my subconscious in this guy's body. And but all of the other characters, I'm like, it feels more natural to write those in third person past because it's a different perspective and it's not Hank. So that's the only series I've ever done that in. And when I decided to stop doing that, it was easier. It was easier. But that was something that Jeremy did in his Antarctic Saga series. Was you had Solomon Vincent, who is the main character in those novellas, and all of his stuff is first person present, but the rest of the book is third person past. And it was just a weird, unique, quirky way of writing, and I had picked up on it and liked it, and that I just implemented it in my own work. But it's not common, so I don't, off the top of my head, I don't really know of too many others that I've read that are flipping POV styles. But I mean, like my Unseen series, my Frank Moon series, it's 100% first person present. And that's just fun to write because it's just chapter after chapter after chapter. It just never stops. There's no POV switch. The scenes are all just one after the other after the other. Sorry. The one, the only Ernest Dempsey just popped in. So Ernie, are you watching Bluey while you do this show? Because I am. Thanks, Ernie. Thank you very much. But I was wondering if we were gonna. There are two of us. What does that mean, Ernie? There are two of us.
Got a doppelganger on there.
I guess, yeah. And we have another question from Allison. Have either of you written a character that you disliked so much that you didn't put them into your books? Interesting. Usually if I don't like a character, I kill them horribly. I really make them pay. I don't necessarily know. I'm trying to think. I mean, there are probably a couple of characters that I wish I would have written differently or rewritten after the fact, like the Vinny character that you and I were talking about, the My Cousin Vinny character. And it was mostly because I did get a little like too, in certain cases, I got a little too over the top, kind of stereotypical New York Italian. And after reading it or after going through it a few times, I was kind of like, but this is like books later. So I'm like, I'm not going back and, I wish I had changed that. Oh, Ernie. Ooh, good question. So now we have a 3-man going with this?
So, Allison, your question, one thing, the way I would answer that is I have written people, there would typically be someone who is, they're not an antagonist per se, but they're on the side of the protagonist, the good guys, but they're really awful and they're in their way and they just really, really suck. So I don't like them at all, but I've done it to a point where it's like, man, this guy needs to be in here because he's horrible and it really elicits that emotional reaction. So even as I'm reading it, peripherally, I'm like, man, this guy's a pile of garbage. I don't like him at all, but I'm going to keep him in here. So it's never been that bad, but it's gotten pretty close. And often it's because, circling back to what Matt was saying, you can tie these people to experiences that you've had. And so to me, it's like, this guy's too much like somebody I really don't like in real life, which makes him an awesome villain to have in here. But he's a big turd, so I really don't like having to deal with him.
Yeah. I'll purposely make kind of like that. So I just, on my other podcast on Armchair Directors that I do with a buddy of mine, Richard F. Padden, we had Kevin Tumlinson on for 3 episodes, and we were talking Ghostbusters. So we did Ghostbusters 1, 2, and Afterlife. And it reminds me of William Atherton, who was Walter Peck. And and he was one of the best casted, best written, worst characters in a laundry list of some of my favorite movies. Like, I hated Peck. Like, he was so obnoxious, so annoying, so high and mighty, so this, but William Atherton was perfect. He nailed the character. And I love that character, but I was so annoyed with him, but in a good way, in a entertaining way. So I would usually try to go over the top and just make it work. And then just, depending on the series, just figure out a really awful way to end him. So James, I am seeing your questions in the Facebook chat, but they are not coming up on my other screen for me to put them onto onto the stream. I don't know why. It might be something on your end with your permissions. So I'm just letting you know we are seeing your questions, but I cannot put them up on screen. It's very odd. But James, to both of you, what historical person would you want to put in your books? So maybe a historical person that you have not written about. I know you and I that's kind of our field of expertise, we'll call it. So what about you? Is there somebody that you would love to write about for one reason or another that you haven't done it? Maybe it's too difficult a character, too difficult a person to really make it work. Or maybe a character that doesn't really have a lot to do with history, but it's just an interesting person.
That's a really good question.
Yeah, it's a great question.
I would say, oh man. I would say I'm going to look to somewhere that I really, you're right. I've plumbed a lot of the places I find interesting. And I know you have too. You know, you're talking about getting into the different historical eras, the Arthurian stuff. I would say a person that has a lot of potential, and I know this is an overused character, and he's in a lot of different books, but I think Abraham Lincoln, with his combination of time period, the adversity he faced, and just the opportunity to write a bunch of awesome stories based around that within a short time frame. I think Abe Lincoln would be a pretty cool guy to have in. I know many other writers have done that, and they've done it quite well. Just personally, I think that would be an interesting way to incorporate, American history and kind of the what if questions that lead to all the stories.
Yeah, he'd be fun. I did my, my favorite, which was Ernie's favorite, since he's still in the chat, is Teddy Roosevelt and the Roosevelt Conspiracy. Mostly because of his involvement with the national park systems and that kind of stuff. So he was like the perfect, like in this case, just president, not necessarily just quote historical. But us being Americans, we go as far back as our country a lot. So as far as like global, man, like I said, I'm going to be doing some work when it comes to like biblical figures and Arthurian figures. I've always wanted to write about the Arthurian legends. So that is definitely on my to-do list. Not necessarily King Arthur in general, but it's just the time frame and the stories are just so fascinating. Considering that for the vast part of it, it's all BS, which, as far as just proof, it's just so fascinating that it's so widely known and loved, but it's very much considered just fiction. So King Arthur is definitely one of them, or just the characters Merlin, Galahad, like those guys. I just think that's a cool thing, just a cool weird thing, because there's so much like bad record keeping because of a lot of the Crusades, the wars, medieval times, the Dark Ages. There's just so much reason. There's so much history that's lost there that a lot of this could be true. There's just zero evidence of it all, just because of the time frame it comes out of. So I would definitely say the Arthurian. I mean, I'm currently doing it, but it's been on my bucket list for a long time to write about, and I'm finally being able to do it. Other ones would be a lot of the guys from the Bible, just because they are so historically, even outside of the Bible, they're just very historically relevant. I'm intrigued, very, very much intrigued. But yeah, Ernie, Teddy is my dude. Yeah, we know. You've gotten a lot of FaceTime on this show. I don't know if that's fair, but and again, James, I don't know why your comments are not popping up like others are. So I do apologize. I'm not entirely sure why that is happening. Ernie might know, since you're in the chat. I'm guessing it's his permissions, but I don't know. So we got another question. Let's see. Another question from Allison. Is there a genre that is very different from your own that you might think about dabbling in? I mean, that's a yes, but I'm curious what... I've dabbled into it very, very tiny, little bit, and I'm curious if you have another one.
So yes, and the answer would be the horror genre. And I know Matt has, the apocalyptic fiction angle has been touched on for in your world. And I'll tell you, it's a very simple, silly reason that is not a good reason to do it. One of my favorite books is Salem's Lot, Stephen King's vampire story. And it's like, man, that I enjoyed that book so much. I want to try and write something like that. And that's like saying, hey, I watched Michael Jordan play basketball. I want to go try and play some basketball. Like, come on, man. But no, I think horror would be cool, specifically the vampire. That's definitely not an overplayed genre. People have not tapped that out. I feel like there's a lot more juice to get out of that one, especially if you get into the romance angles.
Sorry, we have the best comment of the night. What's going on, Zach? Right. Thanks for popping in. Thanks for pooping in. Can't have.
I'd say horror, vampire specifically.
Yeah, I'll say the sci-fi horror. So, a couple of friends of mine, Greg Beck and Michael McBride. They're like, in my eyes, two of the best at it when it comes to sci-fi horror, and maybe a little supernatural elements in it too. But I've done it with my Unseen series, which this is a good life lesson for some authors out there that are maybe struggling to sell books that are legitimately good writers. Is look at your genres and see how widespread you are. Because the issue with that is what I found is the closer to the vest I stick with action adventure, the better I perform sales-wise. So like I know my niche, I know my genre of choice. It's what I love, but it's also what I love writing. But yes, it's exactly what I said, Nick. Yes. But I really love the sci-fi horror. It's the Floridian in me. It's a hard word to say. We have this weird accent down here. Sorry. It's like some of the Brits that I know, some English, there's like some weird words. Or some Jersey. I have a Jersey girlfriend of mine, Casey. The woulda, or the wooder type of thing. Yeah. Horror. But I love writing it. I hate with a passion horror as entertainment. Hate it. Don't watch it. It doesn't entertain me visually, story-wise. I love writing it. I love writing it. So like Sub-Zero was one that I wrote that was sci-fi horror, and it sold very well. It wasn't as received as far as like reviews and ratings and stuff, but it sold very well, and I had a blast writing it. And that's definitely a genre I would love to jump back into. I have a ton of ideas. I have covers that I made like 5 years ago for books that I planned on writing in the genre, and I haven't needed them just because I haven't written them. But yeah, it's definitely the horror, but it's more of the sci-fi version. So more like monsters, creatures, mutations, not even post-apocalyptic stuff. It's more like genetic malformation, that type of stuff. So it's yeah, that would definitely be the genre of choice that I would jump into. I know some authors that have gone like straight fantasy when it comes to like world building. That's ridiculous. Like James Razone, who I just had on Real Life Fiction. The dude's background as a military interrogator and DoD contractor, I mean, he's awesome. And he's a great writer. The Monroe Doctrine that he writes. He has a series, Rise of the Republic, that is a more or less like 70 years in the future kind of space opera. And he's got like 8 or 9 books in it. And it is like a world that he created from scratch. And I'm like, bro, I don't even know where to start with stuff like that. So, I mean, it would be interesting, but that is so over my skis that, man, I don't know. But yes, Nick, poop. Do you have anything actually like remotely, or are you just here to confuse and or distract me, which is not hard to do. But oh, he likes the horror version over the horror version. Got it. So yes. But yeah, so yeah, Ernie said he can see James's comments as well, but it's more or less being able to, they are not popping up on my StreamYard Dash, which is how I flip them onto the screen, unless there is a way to do it in Facebook, and I have no idea. Not very user-friendly, I will say that, as far as the dashboard. But here we are. But yeah, clean your mind. I know, Allison, right? Yeah, Nick needs to clean his mind. It's not going to happen, but he needs to clean his mind. So, but yeah, I was trying to think. There was something that was coming out that I wanted your opinion on. Have you seen the trailer for the movie 65?
I have not.
It looks ridiculous, like, and in the best way possible. So what I want to do is, the only reason is because from a storytelling aspect, it sounds amazing. And it stars Adam Driver, who I love, who should be the lead in all the new Star Wars movies, not Rey. Just going to say, Ben should have lived. I'm going to say that forever. So it's Adam Driver, but it's 65 because he is an astronaut, which very little has been released about the movie itself. It's written by the guys that did A Quiet Place, which I thought was really cool. But it takes place 65 million years into Earth's past. And it is a sci-fi military type thing. He's like a kind of a lone survivor type dude. I think there's one other person, at least in the trailer, there's only one little girl. He is an astronaut who is transporting people in stasis pods across time, I guess. And they crash in prehistoric Earth. And he has like a bunch of like futuristic weapons and stuff, but he is battling dinosaurs. Okay. And it's Adam Driver, which I think is cool, just because it's a role that I wouldn't have seen him in, but I just thought it. So I didn't know if you had seen it, but like the premise of it just seemed so, and like I would love to write something like that, but that's like a lot of mixing of different genres. Like I've done dinosaurs before and they're fun, and I do plan on doing more of that in the kind of near future, but it's probably going to be a couple years based on my current schedule. But no, only reason I ask is because I saw the trailer again a few days ago and it's kind of fresh in my mind. It's really cool. So
that's a mashup. Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, dinosaurs, you can never go wrong. I asked my son; he knows that too. But that's cool. No, I have not seen that. I will check that out.
Thanks, Chris. Sounds super nerdy and something you would force me to watch.
It's like borderline educational. I think it counts for something.
It counts. Yeah. I mean, she liked Adam Driver. She liked Ben. No, yeah, it looked cool, and I was, like I said, it's more from the storytelling aspect, because I saw the it's just the number 65. It's just 65 is the name of the movie, and I was like, oh, 65. What is this? Adam Driver. Okay, cool. And then like it's space, and you don't see anything as far as dinosaurs until like halfway through, and when you see one, I'm like, oh, 65. I get it. And then it just gets really, and then it gets really nuts with like raptors and T-Rex, and you're just like, whoa. I'm like, whoa, you want to talk about a epic story? I'm like, that just sounds really cool. So, but
interesting. I was waiting until near the end. So Adam Driver, he's from Star Wars. I hate to admit this, I've never actually seen Star Wars.
Oh my god.
He's got the long hair.
Yeah. He's done a ton of other stuff, but I specifically know him as Kylo Ren, and his real name is Ben Solo. So he's he is he's Han and Leia's son later in life.
Okay, cool.
So, but Allison, again, for both of you, what is your next book, and could you let everyone know about it? So we actually touched on this before we actually figured out how to make Facebook Live like functional. So
we've been doing a lot.
Yeah, we went over it a lot, but we can do a quick rehash. This is going to be saved so people can go back and listen, but we can definitely do a rehash real quick. If Andrew, if you want to give like a quick detail on, I guess, what's next on your plate, or what are you currently working on versus, I guess, what's so.
Yeah, for sure. No, thanks for asking, Allison. So the 5th book in my Harry Fox series, called The Peg and Hammer, will be coming out in the middle of March. And then in early, I'd say June-ish, the sixth book in that series will be coming out. I actually am just getting the cover design right now, so I'll be sharing that shortly. And that will conclude the series arc. It won't conclude the series, but there's if you've been reading them, there's a pretty consistent theme throughout them. That's kind of this background question. Those questions will be answered. So the next two Harry Fox books for me. But
Cool.
thank you for asking.
Nice. Yeah. I have the fifth book in my Jack Riley series coming out on February 15th. That is The Venetian Pursuit. So I combined two of the most popular missing persons cases in history, in my opinion, which is Amelia Earhart and the lost fleet of Marco Polo from 1291, the fleet that just went up and missing. So north of 500 or 600 people went missing, 13 ships went missing, and nobody knows why, still to this day. So he never revealed it, and loaded down with what I would assume is billions of dollars in treasure coming from Kublai Khan. And just 16, 17 people arrive in Persia on one ship, and that is it. So I just thought it was always such a unique, weird thing to happen, considering his record and his legitimacy as an explorer. But also with that many people coming from that prestigious of a kingdom, Kublai Khan's kingdom in ancient China, or that area roundabout. I always thought that was a cool thing. And then Amelia Earhart, just because it's still such a, it's almost like a romantic idea now of like this explorer that gone missing, and almost 100 years ago now, in 1937. So I did kind of a mashup of those two things. So that's coming out, and more secluded. It's the complete opposite of The Undying Kingdom, which Undying Kingdom is this massive, huge thing with a lot of travel. Venetian Pursuit is very secluded and very like Uncharted Island type thing. So it's a little more like enclosed, I guess, as a way to think about to describe it. Currently writing The Blood King, first book in a new series called The Relics of God. Relics of God is going to tackle biblical artifacts, not just New Testament, but also Old Testament artifacts. And after that, I'm actually going to hop right back into my Jack Riley series with book 6, which I have leaked the name of on my Amazon page for the Venetian Pursuit pre-order. It is in the description of that book at the bottom. It's the only place I have it. So if anybody has pre-ordered the book, they may have read it. But it is going to be called The Lost Legion. And it is going to tackle the 9th Legion of the Imperial Roman Army from Julius Caesar and their disappearance, which will also link in another of history's greatest men, which is Alexander the Great. So a lot to unpack with that book. That's going to be another like Undying Kingdom book where it's like massive. It's just going to have a ton going on. I can just foresee it just based on locations I want to use and characters I want to introduce. That's kind of the extent. I will hopefully be writing. Nick and I will be putting out Desire Kane 2 at the end of the year. And yeah, a lot to do. a lot to do. We did get another question. So he may have heard me say the word dinosaur. So this was what I was hopefully hinting at. And James, Dark Island 2 in the foreseeable future. Yes, there was always a plan to write 2 more books, Dark Island 2 and 3. For one reason or another, I just haven't gotten to it. And at this particular moment, being 4 years removed from the first book, I do plan on writing books 2 and 3, but I have a little bit of some moving and shaking to do with the first book as far as publishing rights and stuff. So I'm in the process of trying to figure something out because I do want to write those books, but I have a few things to take care of before it happens. So that's the main reason I haven't done it now. But yes, I do plan on writing books 2 and 3 in the Dark Island series, but it still probably won't be for a couple years, which is unfortunate. But yeah, that's my dinosaur series, we'll call it. But yeah. But yeah, that's kind of our current work and our future work coming up. So I know we've been on the air for over an hour, but I know you guys have probably only seen 40 minutes of it because we had about a 15 or 20 minute of just us chit-chatting without being able to use Facebook. So, but yeah, no, it's there's a lot going on over here. I know Andrew's got a ton going on. We can hang out for a little while longer, and then we could say our goodbyes to everyone. Um, Thank you so much for all the comments too, by the way, all the questions. I love doing stuff like this. Hopefully, the next time, um, we'll just have a ton of. Oh, we have another one from Allison for you, Andrew. I'll have pop it up on the screen while I look something up. It says, Andrew,
Uh,
what has been the most interesting random thing that you found whilst looking into writing any of your books?
that's a great question. Hmm. I would have to say this is going to get a little ephemeral, but so in my Parker Chase series, the second book, The Crown's Vengeance, it's tied to it's basically kind of a financial calamity book, and it looks into tying together a series of historical financial events with the overarching theme of someone being the puppet master behind all of those, terrible times that have happened. And it goes back to it starts back in like 1812 with the War of 1812 and progresses through history and goes to the Great Depression. And the one thing that I found to be the craziest part was the dominoes that fell leading to the Great Depression were so incredibly mundane, but also so predictable. And I'm talking about things like commodities trading, cotton, oil, um, just the fact that our economies are so intertwined that a few people deciding that they want to get rid of all of their oil over in England could eventually turn into what precipitated the Great Depression in America. It just blew my mind that we're on such, we're so interconnected and we're on such a razor's edge of everything's okay. And it can all go so wrong so fast. That really blew my mind. I know that's a super high level, not concrete thing, and I'm sorry, but that still sticks with me. It's like, man, we're really just skating by and nobody wants to see how close it is to falling apart.
Yeah, no, I'm right with you there. It's amazing how like just like little decisions that aren't really that big of a they don't have a lot of value, face value on their own, but the way that they can just snowball with like a little push or a little something, and how they can just completely domino and just destroy an entire economy, for instance, or even a world economy. Um, like for me, I guess it's just doing some research into like I mean I can tell you right now the current book I'm writing without giving away a lot. When you do some research into like what I'm writing about, which is the Holy Grail, and you do a little research into that, and you're like, okay, how can I tie the Holy Grail from the Bible, the Holy Chalice, which isn't a gigantic part of the story at face value, into one of the most significant biblical artifacts in history, but not be not directly because of the Bible, it's because of the King Arthur lore. And like that's what we know from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, right? It's the Holy Grail, but it's the Arthurian Grail. Um, and it's like doing research on both ends of that story and trying to weave them into one story, and then just on my own realizing there's so much correlation between them with like other characters that it's kind of a mind-blowing thing where you're like, wow, okay, well there goes half my outline, because that's like mind bomb, like whoa, that's cool. And like I've done that with research. I mean that's the current thing I'm working on, and Andrew's done this too, where once you're done with a book and you move on to the next one, it's like all systems go on the current project. So it's like I know when I've done research on some of my other books, like The Forgotten Fortune, I know I did that with when I was writing about the Nazi gold train and that, and then I realized that there's like, so when you think of like massive gold deposits and like treasure, you think of the Knights Templar. And I'm like, I haven't done a ton of research into the Crusades. I'm doing that now with just more of this Arthurian and then the biblical stuff. But I start like researching some of that stuff, and I'm like, oh, there was a sect similar to the Knights Templar in Poland. My book takes place in Poland. When were they active? Okay. All right, that's interesting. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, let's go. So then your just eyes open wide and you're like, oh, this is going to be good. So it's like, it's just little things like that. It's just, you can connect the dots sometimes and you can come up with some massive, massive, massive elements to add to a story.
So can I throw out one more crazy one?
Yeah,
Part of what I'm researching for my
absolutely.
current book, the majority of people who lived, the majority of people who lived in the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages, so roughly from like say 500 to about 1200, never traveled more than 10 miles from the place where they were born in their entire life. That absolutely blew my mind.
Wow.
So like you think about all the villagers, not the knights or the kings or the
Mm-hmm.
ladies in waiting. It's like they never went anywhere. They were born in a village. They grew vegetables and slaughtered cows, and then they died there. They never went anywhere in their whole lives, which were probably 25 years long. So they didn't have that much time.
Jeez. Yeah, I had no idea. I didn't know that.
It was just wild.
Yeah, that's
History
insane.
doesn't talk about them. So
No, yeah, and I know that whole time frame is interesting to me because you start getting into like the Dark Ages and medieval times and the Middle Ages and that kind of stuff, and it was so war torn, and there was, and that's where a lot of there's a disconnect in like history because of just record keeping and lack thereof. So it's that era is just so fascinating to me because there's so many what ifs that come out of that part of history, that 200, 300, 400 year span of just that era that we just don't know. It's just so odd to me because I mean, what's possible? What did we miss? So and what did we miss from ancient history that maybe records were found during the Middle Ages that then were destroyed? So it wasn't just from the Middle Ages, but it's also stuff from ancient history that may have been discovered because all of that was happening in some of like the oldest European nations and then into some of the Middle Eastern nations, which have some of the deepest, richest history in the world. Um, so let's see. My wife has a question. If you woke up tomorrow and you were a B character in any of your books, who would you want to be and why?
it's interesting.
True. That's a good question. That's a very good question.
Yeah. So I can I run? So in my
Yeah.
Parker series, there's a guy he liaises with who is a CIA agent, but he's based in the United States. He's this kind of secret agent officer of the CIA that works on our soil as opposed to they take over the FBI's territory basically, and there's only very few of them. Well, this guy he's a Navy veteran, current CIA agent. He was the heavyweight boxing champion in the Navy, so he's a big bruiser, but he's also a very quiet, reserved man, and I think he leads a very interesting life. I wouldn't want to be him because he's a big bruiser guy, but because he is just such a dichotomy of he kind of tiptoes his way through life until he has to become a bull in a china shop. And he also has a really cool job. I think it'd be neat to see all the kind of stuff they learn as CIA guys.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, I've always had a soft spot for well, you say bull in a china shop is bull, Tatanka Durham in my Jack Riley series. He is a park ranger in Yellowstone. He is a Lakota Native American through and through, full blooded. And he is an expert tracker. He has like a connection with the earth where he can just feel things, he can hear things. Jack always says he's got like this supernatural connection with the earth, but it's just a lot of the time Jack's thoughts in his brain are just so rattled and so hyper that he just doesn't have the patience to sit and just listen and just feel, where that's like Bull's expertise is like sitting quietly and just listening to the earth. And it's what makes him such a good tracker. It's what makes him such a good ranger. And Jack's learned a lot from him in the 4+ years that he worked as a Yellowstone Ranger in between his Delta days and now his TAC days. The character that I built with Bull is always been a pleasing character for me. He's always been a calming presence, influence, and Jack is completely the opposite. So I always thought that Bull would be kind of cool, just to be kind of like that, that calming presence in the storm that is Jack Riley. So I mean, that was definitely one. I have some other characters that are like those big bulls that are just like bruisers and like action heroes and this and whatever's, but Bull was probably one of those characters that I wrote that was almost like he was pleasing to write because he was so calm and he could just chill out an entire chapter just with his presence and his speech and his just like, everybody shut up when Bull talks because he doesn't say anything unless it's worth something. Where Jack will say whatever he wants. He doesn't really have a filter. So maybe it's because I'm so used to writing Jack and I love that character so much that when I write Bull, he's just so different, but purposefully different. So yeah, I mean, that would definitely be mine. So, but, well, guys, I will say, thank you. Any last minute questions we can also answer as we're wrapping up here. But this is Real Life Fiction Live. This is a live event. And as I do more of them, I'm hoping to iron out the kinks and get more people involved just because it is kind of difficult to do in some respect, just based on softwares and so many different reasons. Anyways, like I can't get back into the dashboard on Facebook to like monitor things. It just disappeared when I clicked on something and I have no idea how to get back into it. So I'm not going to worry about it right now. But we're going to try to do more of these. This is just an extension of my Real Life Fiction podcast. This is just a live where I can have, guys like Andrew back on who I may have talked to in the past, just as a little bit more low key, just kind of laid back kind of version. Not that Real Life Fiction is super serious, but this is definitely more of just us kind of BSing and then reading some of y'all's questions. And because I can only come up with so many questions to ask Andrew while hosting a show. So this is like a lot of these questions were not questions I would have come up with on my own. So thank you for that. Just more information. So, one more from Allison. This is why I love your books. You and other authors put some truth, some conspiracy theories, and throw a curveball to try and figure everything out. As a reader, as a consumer, I like it too. So it's probably where it comes from.
Thanks, Allison. A little bit of BS in my case, So
yeah, there's got to be a little bit. There's got to be, and and thank you for the kind words. There were some things like what Andrew was saying earlier with seeing some appreciation from the readers. I don't do this a lot anymore. I used to do it when I was a younger writer. The ratings and reviews on Amazon specifically, and any shares that y'all can help us out with on social media. They go a long way, and there is a lot of, I guess it's kind of like censorship on social media platforms when it comes to businesses, because they want you to pay for advertising. And that's the one thing that you guys can help us circumnavigate is sharing posts that Andrew and I would post on social media to your own pages, to your own friends, to other readers that you know. It goes a long way because that's a lot of stuff that we get blackballed and just blocked. That's something that it's a big deal for us. And the ratings and reviews are the same thing on Amazon. Those ratings and reviews mean a lot. They don't necessarily mean a lot as far as like me reading them all and then cursing someone out when they give me a bad review. It means a lot for the visual, my brain is really scattered right now. For Amazon to see our book and then sell it and push it further in their own advertising. Because it's kind of the same thing. That's why some books take off better than others is because of early ratings and reviews on those specific titles. So anything you all can do to help us with that, obviously not just us, it's all writers, all of your favorite writers. It goes a long way. It really, really does. Because we can only do so much. I can only share so much on my end before it's all for naught and it's just a waste of time. So, but yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for doing that. For those that do, we do get notifications when people do share our stuff. So thank you. I try to like and say thank you to everybody, but that's a big deal. So, Andrew, any last words before we cut out for the night and say our goodbyes? Anything?
I appreciate everybody chiming in. This has been awesome. Shout out to you, Matt, for putting this together and figuring things out on the fly. You
Yeah.
made it happen. So thanks,
And
man.
I apologize. Yeah, I apologize for Andrew to be my my guinea pig, my test subject on this.
Hey, man, it's all good.
We came on early and we're like, hey, I wonder how easy this is going to be. I don't know what I'm doing. Why is nobody in our chat? What's going on? So now I know. So I know I have to set it to public. Friends doesn't work. Invite blah 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 doesn't work. So yeah, we're just gonna figure this out. Hopefully the next one I won't have to figure so much out, but you never know. So, but thank you all for watching that tuned in live on Facebook. Thank you all for listening. Like I said, I will hopefully, I don't see why I can't. I will hopefully be able to download this and upload it as an extension in the Real Life Fiction feed. I will definitely put this on the audio podcast. As far as video, I don't know. Honestly, it's just what's possible. I'm pretty sure I can get the audio out of this. So worst case scenario, you'll get an audio version out of this and you'll just hear us talking and rambling like we usually do. But thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. And we will see you next time. Thanks.